Well, this time of the year, there is something new in the garden every day. And as part of my recovery from hip surgery, I have to do a concentrated walk daily. And I've enjoyed doing that with my wife, usually in the mornings. And what we'll do is we'll hit the neighborhood for part of it, but then we'll also tour the garden, surveying all the new stuff that's come out that day. The tulips are one of those features that is actually regularly giving us new things right now, something new almost on a daily basis. I've talked about this in the prior videos looking at tulips, but it really resonates with me more now that I see these kind of beautiful flowers around me. The fact that unfortunately tulips are relatively spendy and when you buy them, even when I buy them in bulk, I haven't been able to get it lower than say 25 to 30 cents a bulb. More often, a lot of times I'm paying closer to 50 cents a bulb. So I try to take some extra care to try to keep them coming back, although it is inherently a losing cause. Unlike the daffodils, which are kind of a sweet investment, and they, you put them in and they seem to come back pretty easily year after year. In order to get my tulips to come back, to give them the most likely chance of coming back, I let the green stay on the tulip, the green leaves and everything. And then as the tulip head dies, I will cut the seed pod off, I'll deadhead it so that the energy goes down into the bulb. Then I'll let the green sit there until it dies back, which it'll take probably until late June, early July before that happens. And then I will pull up the bulbs and I will store them in the shed where it's nice and cool and dry, and essentially there they will stay until late September, early October, and then at that point that's when they go back out into the garden along with a new batch of new tulip bulbs to kind of keep the process going. And when I dig the tulips up, I'm not really great about sorting by color, so essentially all the prior tulips that I have are all kind of just multicolored. And so that's one of the things that I do out here is I kind of have a bed that is designated for putting all the old tulips in to kind of get this multicolored show. So as you can see, the show is continuing. We've got more tulips blooming now, and I'll keep you updated on this tulip show as it unfolds throughout the rest of the season here.
Are you kidding me? It is snowing out here after we had 70-degree weather last week. Now it is snowing this week. It is April 11th and it's full-on snow. We thought we were just going to get like some snow mixed with rain. It was going to be a little bit unusually cold, but no, we've got a full-on snow going here.
According to the local news, they've been tracking snow out here at the PDX airport since the 1940s. And this is the first time this late in April that we've had this kind of snow.
That's pretty unusual. I don't remember that ever happening in gardening here. And that leads to a lot of questions that I don't know. Like, I don't know what this does to the tulips. We've had the tulips taken out by a heat wave last year, but I don't know if the snow is going to damage the tulips and take them out or not. I guess we'll see. By the time I post this video, we'll probably have an answer to that in some way.
Always, I've thought of mid-April, around the 15th, to be the last frost date. But I've questioned if I was being too conservative in the past, because the temps, in the last couple of years, the temps have been so warm throughout April, at least in my gardening memory. This event certainly puts the later date back in play. So now we're looking at more like May. Most of you probably know this, but the last frost date is a trigger point for when you can put certain plants outside, and it also sets a touch point for when I can start seeds. It's too late for me to change that, but an example would be that since I believe my last frost date to be around April 15th, if seeds were intended to be started 8 weeks before the last frost, I would have targeted a start date for those seeds around February 15th. I'm not exact with it. It's plus or minus a week or two, so it'll still be okay. That being said, in the last year, I felt guilty about not getting my tomatoes out until May, like I was losing ground. But this also gives me faith in that plan. Well, what about the plants I already have outside? Well, I'm not sure what this will do to the daffs and tulips. Like I said, I've never seen snow this late in this gardening season. Last year, my tulips got fried by heat waves. But from what I can see so far, the tulips appear to be holding up. Their closed, pointy heads shed the snow. The daffs, on the other hand, appear to have been weighted down, maybe even toppled over. So I don't know if we'll see them spring back up or if that's it for the daffs, if the snow has ended their show for the season. I hope not. The tulips have been quite spectacular, and you can tell around the garden I love my tulips. But I use daffs. They're kind of an understated set of backup singers. They're like the backup dancers in the show. And the crocuses, well, those are already done for the season, so no problem there. As for seedlings that we put out things like snapdragons, foxgloves, larkspurs, and sweet peas, and they were planted out over the last few weeks. For veggies, the only thing we planted out were peas and onions. The harvests you've been seeing me doing are from plants established last fall. I think all of these items that we planted in seedlings should be just fine, but we'll see. Well, we made it. As you can see behind me, for the most part, these tulips made it. Unfortunately, the snow toppled the daffs, but that seems to be the only casualties so far, at least on the flower side. So on the flowers, beyond the tulips, we had some foxgloves, snapdragons, a larkspur. All of that seems to be okay. All of that was out here in the beds, and they seem to be doing fine. We also planted some loveliness seedlings right before the snow, and I was worried about them because I have less experience with those. And so I thought, well, maybe the snow will cause a problem with that, but they look like they pulled through as well. On the veg side, we had onions and peas planted out here over the last month, and they're also looking fine after the snow. So all in all, having kept the warm-loving plants like eggplants, peppers, tomatoes, and some of the flowers like celiosas and cosmos, keeping those in the basement so far, not getting them out here. It's a beautiful day now, but having those still in the basement, the April snow really didn't create much of a setback for what we're doing here in the garden. Well, I thought I was going to outsmart the hunger gap, but it doesn't look like I made it. This week I don't really have much of a harvest. I did get a nice maybe 2.5 pound bag of rab from Brussels sprouts and kale and things like that would be good eating and fine for me and my family, but nothing to donate this week. I was donating for the last 2 weeks, which made my donation schedule earlier than the prior year. So I was ahead of schedule, but I think I got overzealous after kind of harvesting the purple sprouting broccoli and the rab and the leeks and the kale leaves and the chard leaves and all of that kind of good stuff over the last couple of weeks, and then having a snow this last week. There just wasn't anything here to harvest, not enough lettuce to make a salad bag either. I made salad bags the last couple of weeks. So yeah, that's the state of the harvest, is not quite there yet. But as you know, if the weather keeps like this, probably next week we'll be back in business. Well, I've historically had challenges germinating and planting spinach. I've waffled between just sowing the spinach directly in the ground, between sowing in trays, like the 6 cell trays. And at first I thought, well, maybe sowing in the trays was my issue because I wasn't always getting good germination. But I saw other gardeners on YouTube starting their spinach in cells successfully. So that convinced me that it's a fine way to do it. I just needed to kind of level up my nurseryman skills. So that's what I've been working on this year. And the round of seedlings that I have of spinach are looking perfect so far. So I have high hopes for the spinach patch we're putting down in this bed over here. After planting this, I'm hoping to harvest the leaves from these plants that are here in the bed in about 2 to 3 weeks, and then maybe keep harvesting through mid-June or so. I think somewhere around then, mid-June or so, we'll probably have a few too many hot days and the plants will start to bolt. Well, I did it. I was going to avoid buying a round of garden mulch this year because back in the fall, it looked like I wouldn't need it. The beds out here in the north kitchen garden were pretty full, perhaps over full in some cases, and I had quite a bit of good, I'd say 1.5 to 2 yards of homemade compost over here in my compost area. And so I just used the homemade compost, and I planned that would be good. I'd just call it good for the rest of the season. But now that we're in the spring, I've noticed that some of our flower beds are looking pretty bare. And it'd be nice to have that dark mulch cover. It just makes things in the bed look nicer. So I got a load back here, right, you can see right behind me here, 4 yards of garden mulch from Grimm's Fuel. It's a landscaping here in the Portland, Oregon area, and we are spreading it in the flower borders. We still have to redo some of the paths as well behind. I'm behind on that project this season. So once we get all this mulch moved out and put into the beds, then we'll do another order of cedar wood chips and we'll get the paths finished and squared away. Well, after moving the first round of tall white stem bok choy seedlings back there into the greenhouse, they blew up with the regular sunlight and they became ready to plant. So we've been planting them in the garden beds about 4 to 6 inches apart. They grew up to this size even during the cold spell and snow we had outside this week. So I think regular sunlight is the key component for them. As you can see, I'm putting them in the bed. I have them in this bed over here. Not that many that were ready, probably about 20, 30. My planting method is similar to other things you've seen me plant. I come along with my stick and I poke a hole in the ground, and then I put some organic fertilizer, all-purpose organic fertilizer in the hole, plop the seedling in the hole, and that's something I've seen from other gardeners actually not filling the hole around the seedling, but instead letting it just get watered in, because it's raining later today, so that'll work. And I don't know if it's inherently better, but certainly not trying to fill the hole back in is certainly faster. Yeah, it's hailing on me. Not the same as snow, so I'm not going to complain too much. Gives me a chance to go back in the basement, maybe work on some seeds for a little bit. But what I wanted to show you here was species tulips. I love species tulips, and if you haven't heard about these before, I believe these are what the natural or the original tulips that, you know, were found closer to the area of Turkey, what they where they started, like what they actually looked like before we bred them, before they were bred by Europeans and then later growers across the world to these big beautiful bulbs and flowers that we see now. You know, of course, in my garden I love my tulips, but I do love these species tulips quite a bit. Here are some of the seeds that we planted this week. We did a second round of broccoli and a second round of kale. We also did amaranths. We did the hot biscuits amaranth for decoration and an edible amaranth for the kitchen garden. I planted fennel in cell trays. It's more of an experiment. It's kind of late to do that. Plus cell trays is kind of small container for fennel, but we'll see how it goes. And on the herb side, I planted nigella and dill. Here are some of the things we got into the garden beds this week. We planted spinach and bok choy. We continued planting onions. That's been an ongoing project. Similarly, we planted carnations, and then the foxgloves and snapdragons have also been ongoing projects. And now for the ending tulip show. This is post the April snow, and as you can see, things have come back wonderfully. I mentioned earlier that things are changing every day. This was one day in the barrels, and this was the next in the barrels. And yeah, I love tulips, as I've said before, and this bed is the primary show bed where we get to showcase an army of tulips every season, and I just love doing that. And some of it is new. I try to put in new yellows and oranges. That's the primary color scheme, but then you see the other colors in there, which are things that either just came back because they were in the ground and I didn't find them from last year, or they were extra tulips from the prior year that I stuck in the ground to really fill out the bed.